Let us begin. Let me take you back to December of 1997. We were visiting my grandparents before Christmas. I don't entirely remember the reason why, but what I do remember is my uncle and cousins also coming to visit as well. With them they brought a Sony PlayStation with a few games. The most notable that I remember was Croc, Legend of the Gobos. It was during this visit we got a chance to experience the PlayStation for the first time, and I was completely hooked. When it was time to leave, we were all upset. But little did we know that Christmas that year, we'd be getting our own PlayStation. Among the games we got, there was Croc. The game was developed by Argonaut Software, who most notably were involved with the programming of the original Star Fox on NES. It was published by Fox Interactive, who did a lot of the Simpsons games, as well as Die Hard and Alien series games as well. Needless to say that Christmas was spent playing our new PlayStation non-stop. This was the time when I was about to start high school, and while I grew up with classic Sega and Nintendo, this was still my childhood days. But enough about me. You guys want to know what I think about the game, and whether it's aged well. Well, okay, without further ado, this is Croc, Legend of the Gobos. The Island of the Gobos. It's a nice, quiet and peaceful location, if you don't mind the random lava spewing out of the mountainside, which I'm guessing the inhabitants don't. I mean, why else would they be living there? Anyway, out for a morning stroll one day, the king of the Gobos spots a basket floating in the river. Inside, he finds a cute little baby crocodile. Deciding to raise the baby himself, the king teaches him the way of the Gobo, and he's lovingly given the name Croc. Young Croc proves to be a very quick learner, mastering everything the king teaches him, and in no time at all he grows bigger. No, seriously, just like that he springs up. I mean, serious growth spurt. Sadly, it's not all fun and games in the land, as one fateful day the island is invaded by the Danteans and their giant leader, Baron Dante. Dante and his minions begin rounding up all the Gobos they can catch, with others making attempts to escape. Fearing for Croc's safety, the king hands him a backpack and rings a gong, calling forth a bird known as Beanie, who magically shrinks Croc down and whisks him away moments before Dante grabs the king. Laughing maniacally, Dante seals the king away in a cage within his castle. And that's basically it. As Croc, your goal is to set out and rescue the Gobos and defeat Baron Dante and his followers. I'd actually say as far as plot goes, it's very similar to a Mario title. You know, rescuing a member of royalty from an evil tyrant. In fact, if you look very carefully, you may see more similarities than just story alone. Our main protagonist is all green, stands on his back legs, and his main attacks include whipping his tail and ground pounding. Our main villain is a large creature with spikes and a questionable hairstyle. Yes, believe it or not, but this game, when it was originally pitched, started out as an idea for a Mario title in which you'd play as Yoshi, and it was intended for the Nintendo 64. However, Nintendo rejected the idea and the two companies' relationship ended, so Argonaut went to Sony and their idea was used for the PlayStation instead. Nintendo, on the other hand, used the ideas taken from the scrap pitch to develop another game. What game, you may ask?
Here we go! It's me, Mario!
Meh, you probably never heard of it. You control Croc with the D-pad, or the left analog stick if you use a DualShock controller. A lot of early PlayStation games gave you this option because the console originally only came with the standard controller, which didn't feature the analog sticks. You jump with the X button, and tapping the X button again while in the air will cause Croc to do a stomp attack, which can break crates or destroy any enemies underneath him. If you're holding the X button after executing the stomp, Croc will continuously stomp. On a stack of crates, he'll keep going until he hits the ground. It's really fun to do. The square button allows you to do a tail whip attack, which is a lot more accurate than the stomp for taking out enemies. You can activate this attack while on the ground or in the air, and it doesn't break the flow of movement. So you can keep running straight through a group of enemies and whip anything in your path, and then still keep going to avoid getting hit. In case you need to change direction really quickly to avoid a hit, pressing the circle button causes Croc to do an instant 180-degree flip. I personally find this move really useful, especially if you're looking to quickly run in, collect something and then escape again, as the camera will always snap back to behind Croc, so you can always see ahead of you for danger as you're moving. If you need to manually control the camera to get a look around, holding the triangle button down and using the D-pad will allow you to look at your surroundings. I'll be honest, I've never used this feature. The main reason being that while you're using the camera you can't control Croc himself, which leaves you really vulnerable to cheap shots from enemies. Sometimes you need to readjust your position on a platform before or after you make a jump, to make sure you don't slip off, and holding the L1 and R1 buttons allows Croc to carefully sidestep left and right to reposition himself. L2 and R2 allows you to change the view of Croc from a higher or lower perspective, though I personally just stick with the default, since they don't seem to have any advantage other than maybe seeing the platforms lower down than you are. All these controls are a little tricky to get used to at first, and some refer to it as tank controls. Sometimes movement can be a little sluggish, but I can't really say I had a hard time adjusting to them, and the early stages of the game gives you plenty of chance to get used to the feel of it. As you travel through the levels, you can collect white crystals. Think of these like the rings from Sonic the Hedgehog. If you take damage while holding crystals, Croc will drop any he carries. Take damage without holding any crystals and you lose a life. You start back at the door entrance you entered through after each death, but if you lose all your lives, you're treated to this depressing scene of Croc taking a walk of shame. Poor little guy. It's seeing something like this that makes you not want to give up and keep going, because this big prick right here needs to pay. You can also find hearts in the levels as well, and collecting them will give you an extra life for each one. Occasionally in certain levels you can find secret sparkle spots. Touching these points teleports you to another location, where you can score a ton of extra lives at once. It's a good idea to make a mental note about the locations of these spots, as you can return to these levels at any time, and farm lives for later challenges. The game is really simple in structure. There are 4 separate islands that you have to travel through. The first island is forest themed, the second island is ice themed, the third island is desert themed, and the fourth island is Baron Dante's castle itself. Each island has 8 levels, with 6 of them being standard stages, and the other 2 being boss stages. At the end of each standard stage, you need to ring the gong to summon Beanie to pick you up and end the stage. Any crystals you pick up during the stage are added to a running total, and when you reach 100 you're rewarded with another life, and the counter resets to 0. The stages you travel through have a very nice difficulty curve, and each stage presents a rising amount of challenge as you progress through the game. Gimmicks that appear more frequently in later levels are shown off in earlier ones with more breathing room to allow you to get used to the way they work, which is really clever, and it's level design I like to see in a platformer. Desert Island has a lot of tight water levels that Croc will have to swim through, but the earlier Forest Island introduces the swimming mechanic early to allow newer players to adjust. In the same way, Ice Island introduces platform jumping over bottomless pits, something Baron Dante's castle is completely riddled with. As early as the first section of level 1, you're introduced to all the basics at a comfortable pace. As soon as you start the level, a noise to your left shows you a Gobo to rescue, and behind it you can see a coloured gem sitting on a breakable crate. Around you are collectible crystals, in the distance you can see an enemy, and beyond that you can see a crystal behind a rock. Touching it reveals to be another coloured gem, showing that sometimes you have to explore to find certain goodies. Jumping onto the area the Gobo was sitting on, you can see a few platforms to jump on, allowing you to get used to the platforming you'll see later. It's little things like this where the game doesn't flat out tell you what to do, but subtly guides you to try things out for yourself until you're comfortable. The different kind of puzzles and obstacles you come across in the game are plentiful, ranging from switches to press, bouncing jellies to gain extra height, balloons that can carry you across large chasms, climbing frames and walls that you can scale, and special movable crates to climb up to higher terrain. Along the way you'll also find two different types of keys, a silver key and a gold key. The silver key is used for unlocking cages, while the gold keys are used for opening locked doors. Most of the time you'll find them in areas requiring a lot of platforming to reach them, testing your skills and how well you're handling the challenges. Then we have the different types of platforms you're bound to come across. You have your standard platforms to jump on, but then you have your breakable ones with cracks on them, which crumble away after a couple of seconds. You have some that drop straight down after some time, there are some that stretch and squash, some that rotate, some that move, the list goes on. And they're all designed to test you to see if not only are you competent with the controls, but also responsive enough to avoid certain danger. Forest Island is the beginner island, and it allows you to get used to the basic controls and game mechanics. The areas you travel through are very expansive, allowing you plenty of space and time to practice the basics, with the difficulty getting progressive while still being fair. Ice Island introduces slippery terrain and ups the platforming challenge, adding in rotating blocks and a greater focus on the climbing frames. Desert Island is where the platforming becomes a lot more difficult, as the terrain becomes a lot more cramped and the platforms are much smaller. This is also where the bulk of the water levels are, and a number of times some level sections are even in the dark, making the tight platforming even more nerve-wracking. As a final difficulty spike, most of these levels require you to backtrack just to complete the stage. This element is introduced earlier on in the first two islands, but only really for exploration to find optional bonuses. Finally, Baron Dante's Castle, and I hope you honed your skills by this point. Not only does this island use a combination of the challenges from the first three islands, but it also throws a lot of new challenges at you. To some degree they can be seen as really advanced forms of earlier puzzles, but some in particular can be really, really dickish. I'm looking at you, Platform Pete. Enemy varieties are simple. You have your Dantinis, which can range from normal walking ones that can fly, ones that throw frozen spit, ones that fire fireballs, ones that jump around, ones that stomp on the climbing frames to knock you off, and even invincible ones that you have to trick to walk off the stage. You also have island-themed enemies, which are enemies linked to that island exclusively. For example, Forest Island has burrowing worms and sentient fireballs, Ice Island has penguins and dogs for some reason, Desert Island has scorpions and mummies, as well as crabs and sharks for the water sections, and Baron Dante's Castle has scythe-wielding reapers and hungry zombies. Dante's Castle is also home to three unique characters, each taking their own individual levels. Consider these guys the extremes of the puzzles you faced up to this point, and they're completely immune to damage. Ballistic Meg, Swipe Swiftly, and Platform Pete. Ballistic Meg runs around the stage at lightning speed and leaves a trail of fire where she runs. She's probably the easiest of the three to deal with, since she stops every so often to catch her breath, giving you an opening to move. Swipe Swiftly are French-speaking sword-swinging pirates, and on this level, you have to travel down long falling blocks where they like to constantly pop out at you to attack. One tail attack, while not killing them, does send them flying off the block, but sometimes you can be outnumbered by the sheer amount of them at once, so just be careful. Finally we have Platform Pete, and I really don't like this guy. He sits on a platform you can't reach, hitting a switch with his hammer. This causes the platforms in the level to move or flip over to spikes, depending on the situation. Don't get me wrong, I like the concept of this type of platforming challenge, but for fuck's sake, it's done badly here. I think it has something to do with Croc's tank controls. For some reason, when near a platform after a jump, Croc will snap to the platform in some sort of awkward manner, and it causes some sort of jittery movement, which can really screw you over, especially if you're not ready for it. Oh, fuck! Ah, god damn it. This is the only level in the whole game I hate having to play, and in a later level you're given the choice of taking two pathways to reach the goal. One that takes you to Ballistic Meg section, the other takes you to a Platform Pete section. Guess which one I always take. Also, is it just me, or does Pete look like Burke from Trapdoor? Does anyone remember that show? Once you complete 3 standard stages, you're given a boss stage testing your skills even further, and defeating each one gives you a sense of accomplishment, even if sometimes the bosses themselves aren't exactly challenging. They all start out as peaceful creatures that Baron Dante, using his magic, corrupts and turns into evil guardians intent on halting your progress. These range from a boxing ladybird, a needle-firing cactus, a giant mountain goat, and a trident-wielding fish, just to name a few. All these bosses take 3 hits each to defeat, and it's not always about rushing and hitting them. Rather, it's about waiting for the right opening to strike. Baron Dante himself is not much different from regular bosses in terms of strategy, but instead of taking 3 hits to defeat, he takes 9, and after each set of 3 hits, he changes his attacks, so he's a little more challenging in that regard. So with Dante defeated and the Gobo King rescued, Croc returns home to a celebration as his Gobo friends erect a statue in his honor, and they all party on. With that, the credits roll and Croc's adventure is complete. Oh wait. Find all the secret jigsaw pieces? What's that all about? Well, it turns out this is linked to the Gobos you find along the way. In each stage, not including bosses, there are 6 Gobos to find. 5 of them are scattered throughout the course of the stage, with some requiring exploration to find. The final Gobo is always found behind a locked door located at the end of the level. To open the door, you need to find all 5 of the coloured gems, also hidden within the level. If you rescue all 6 Gobos in a set of 3 levels and defeat the boss of that section, you're given a new bonus level, where rather than reaching a gong, at the end of the stage is a jigsaw piece. In total, there are 8 bonus levels, each with a jigsaw piece at the end. So to get access to them, you need to rescue every Gobo in the game. When you do this, you're treated to a short scene where Croc completes his jigsaw, and somehow that does this. How does that work? For that matter, if the jigsaw breaks apart, does the island disappear? Oh, and this guy appears as well. According to many sources, this is supposed to be either Baron Dante's ghost or a resurrection of Dante into a crystal form. But honestly, I don't think it really matters. From a creation standpoint, they just reused Dante's model and put a white texture on it. So yeah, a secret 5th island. There's only 5 levels, the first 4 being single levels based off the 4 previous islands. They aren't hard levels, rather they just increase the number of enemies to a stupid scale. And they really love using the Fireball Dantini. If for some reason the previous islands didn't make you hate these little bastards, trust me, by the end of this island you'll really get sick of them. The final level is a boss fight against the Crystal Baron Dante. You can't damage him at all, and you can't even reach him. Instead, around the chamber is 4 beanie gongs. Ring all 4 gongs and that's it. Crystal Dante explodes and Beanie flies Croc away. Once again the credits roll and you're treated with a message saying the game is fully complete. And was it worth it? Not really. I'll be honest, aside from having a few extra levels with more enemies, there wasn't really any point. The ending with the celebration felt more rewarding since you beat Dante and got to see Croc reunited with his friends. This just feels tacked on. It would have been nice if there had been a bonus ending showing Croc and his Gobo friends interacting with each other. Hell, even having an unlockable character would have been fun. Why couldn't we have had the Gobo King as a playable character? I mean, Croc learnt all his moves from him. I think that would have been funny to see. Graphically, the game is really colourful, and the design, while vastly outdated in comparison to games today, I still think holds up pretty well. The characters are very expressive, and the cartoonish style adds an extra humorous feel to some of the moments in the game. The music is amazing. There are so many memorable tracks, and they fit the levels perfectly. Forest Island's music really sounds like the kind of music I would hear if I were walking through a wood or an open field. It makes me feel like I'm going out on an adventure. Ice Island's music really makes me feel cold. It's got a winter ambience that really puts you in the location. Desert Island has a rocking theme that sounds like it would fit in an Arabian-style environment, actually. I could really see it playing during, say, Aladdin or even Prince of Persia. They really do a good job capturing the feel of the location. Baron Dante's castle is the villain's lair, so the music is very fitting, as it gives a dark, haunting tone to the atmosphere. If there's one thing I can say when I'm playing Platform Pete's level, it's that I can listen to good music while I'm playing. But the absolute highlight of the music is the boss themes. Every single one is orchestral and fits the mood, and it's just a joy to hear. Just listen to the music that plays for Cactus Jack's boss theme. Wait, no, that's wrong. Ah, that's better. Baron Dante even has separate themes for each of his stages, my favourite being the second because of the added organ dirge they give it. Croc is one of those gem games which really seems to get forgotten about, which is such a shame because it's one of those games that defined a lot of early 3D platforming. Sadly, because of a lot of other successful franchises, it became one of those characters that most people just don't seem to give any attention to anymore. I could definitely recommend this game for people to try out. It's not just something kids would get entertainment out of, even adults would have fun playing this. It might not have aged very gracefully, and some might get turned off by the tank controls that haunted early 3D games, but the music, the charm of the characters, and the great level design that went into its creation just makes it an enjoyable experience. I wholeheartedly love this game. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for its sequel. Not because I don't want to play it, but because I haven't actually got much experience playing it as much as I had the first one. And unfortunately, the experience I did get wasn't good. But that's for another time. Until then, if you have any suggestions for a game you want me to look at, by all means drop me a comment. Thank you all for watching. Catch you guys next time.